Welcome to Mystery of the Soul. I'm your co-host Erin, and I'm joined by my friend Leo, a psychic medium and Reiki master. Our podcast explores the depth of the soul, the spiritual, and the supernatural.
Hi guys, welcome back to Mystery of the Soul. This is Leo with you. Just some announcements real quick. So my soul sister Erin and co-host, she's not with us tonight. In exciting news, she's actually gone back to school to kind of pursue a passion of hers. So in addition to caring for her animals, horses, and now classes and research assignments, her time is like really limited. So every now and then, as we're doing some episodes, we may have some new co-hosts. So that's just an FYI why you might not hear Erin's voice tonight. So our guest tonight is a Reiki client of mine and a mentor student of mine. Her name's Shannon, and she and I are going to talk about paranormal investigations tonight. And Shannon, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I am Shannon, and during the day I'm a lawyer, but at night or when I have a few moments of spare time, I am a paranormal investigator. And it's become a growing passion of mine over the last several years. So I spend probably way too much time doing that, but it's a lot of fun, and I highly recommend it if you are looking for something different to do in the dark.
Definitely something different, right?
Yeah.
Do you prefer having flashlights on you or candles, or do you like to be in the dark?
Oh no, we always have flashlights. I mean, the dark is beneficial for certain reasons. People ask us a lot of times, like, can you investigate during the day? And of course you can. But a lot of our equipment it has lights on them. And they are triggered, so they flash. And if it's bright out, it's hard to see them. So, and there's also a lot of daytime noise. So usually prefer to investigate in the night. So we sort of eliminate that daytime noise, and we have, the darkness that we can see our own equipment flash for various reasons.
Yeah.
And it's always a flashlight because I need to see this equipment. I need a flashlight.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, Shannon, so growing up, did you have like either a quiet or an active childhood spiritually with any experiences? How was that for you?
Yeah, I'm one. So there are definitely different schools of people who are investigators. And some of them have had very somewhat traumatic experiences growing up with various hauntings, and they grew into investigators to try and sort of come to terms with what those things were that they were experiencing in their youth. And then there's those of us like myself who really didn't have any kind of experiences like that, but heard of such things, and we're always very inquisitive, and we're always trying to solve mysteries, and we were raised on Scooby-Doo. So I'm not gonna lie.
Nice.
Scooby-Doo
I used to be part of the Scooby-Doo club also.
Yeah, it raised a generation of investigators. I'm not gonna lie. At least one, maybe two generations. Yeah.
So what is it about paranormal investigations that got your curiosity?
Well, as someone who's trained in logical thinking, sort
as
of,
a lawyer.
as a lawyer, you come into this, and you're like, well, this doesn't make any sense. I'm going to try and figure this out. So it becomes a puzzle that you want to sort of, unpack or, solve. And the most engaging part of it is that you never really solve it, because unless you debunk something, right? Like, unless you say, okay, well, that banging noise you hear is a pipe, air going through the pipe and it's banging on the drywall, or that kind of scenario. Then that's often a case. Something banging in your house or knocking in your house is just your house.
That's true.
But Yeah, but when there are things where it's like, well, that actually responded to me intelligently. Like I asked it to go,
Mhm.
I said, finish this knock, and it goes, and you're like, oh crap, that's not a pipe. That's when it becomes interesting, and it's those things that you can't explain that become
Mhm.
very interesting. Because when you rule out all of the other quote unquote rational explanations for something, it's those things that you can't explain that become engaging. And they call ghost hunting, they call paranormal investigating is often called ghost hunting for a reason. It's
Okay.
you're constantly hunting for the next, you're fishing. It's essentially
Okay.
fishing for
That makes sense.
the unknown. So it can become quite a, not an addiction, but certainly an enthusiasm for trying to find answers to things that people can't understand. So does that answer your question?
That
I
that
forgot what
yeah,
your
that
question was.
answers
Sorry.
that answers my question. So I'm just curious, like I know you're a lawyer by day, and there's all kinds of people interested in paranormal investigatings. In like the groups that you've investigated with, what other types of like people and professions during their day are the type of people that are doing this like you?
Oh, that's a good question. It's a motley crew, let's just say.
Yeah.
I investigate with a lot of technology folks, a lot of people in the
Uh-huh.
tech business,
Yep.
people in the medical field, a lot of nurses. I have a lot of friends who are nurses.
Uh-huh.
Um, let's see, I'm trying to think of some of my friends. Therapists and other professionals to park rangers. It really runs the gamut. Financial people, like I can't. I mean, I think it touches on every
So
field,
it's
really.
it's across the board then.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's really the person has found an interest in things they can't explain. So it
Uh-huh.
it really has no bounds in terms of profession. It's not like, not all of us are deep dark, goths forever. Even though we wear black most of the time, it's just kind of our uniform. Just
Yeah,
shows up
yeah,
better on camera. You don't see, like, I'm not gonna lie, those nighttime cameras, if you're wearing something that's white, you look like a giant marshmallow. So I don't care.
yeah. So it sounds like, anybody that has an interest, there's not really necessarily like a pre-qualification that you would
Oh
have to
heck no.
have in order to do that, probably.
Oh heck no. Definitely not. You could be anybody. You just need to, show an interest in it. And if you want to like work with a group to do it or other investigators to do it, you just have to have enough seriousness, like not make fun of it while you're doing it. That's
Right,
really
right.
we all will walk away from someone who is making fun of, you know because I mean, if you
Mhm.
want it for an entertainment value, that's one thing. You can do it for an entertainment thing, and there's a lot of ghost hunts in almost every city in this country where you can go on a ghost hunt that's for fun, just for fun, you know but if you want a real investigation and really want to try and find some things you can't explain, then that's a different crowd. That's more of a, okay, let's not talk the whole time kind of scenario.
So if we're talking not necessarily like entertainment value, and we're just talking also like more down to the investigation and stuff with a particular site or home or wherever you're doing the investigation, it sounded like you were talking about getting into having sort of a respect for the process. And like, is how important is that to have like you and your team having respect for the process and the people and the entities involved?
Well, it's hugely important. I mean, we go into a location, and um, if you're not doing a public event, which is in part entertainment,
Okay.
because there are public ghost hunts, and so part of that will be entertainment because there's a lot of new people who don't, have
Right.
never done it before. But any good investigation, like even a public investigation, will go through the process of here's what you do, here's the process, and here's how you respect the process. Because, we, all of us have day jobs,
Right.
so we don't want to be spending our time, like those of us who are more serious about investigating, don't want to be spending our time, in a place or with people who are just messing around.
Yep.
And there's definitely time for fun, like we go on different things and we'll have nights where we just hang out, but the nights that we're actually doing a, quote unquote serious investigation, you want people to be respectful, and we're entering a space. If we're entering a space where we believe that there are spirits present, we enter the space with the respect of someone else's home. Like, you're going to visit someone's home and you're going to be polite and you're going to introduce yourself and you're going to ask polite questions, and you will not antagonize. You're not going to try and, call someone out and say, come at me, that's for TV. Those are for TV shows, not
Okay.
for real investigations. So it becomes, so you end up gravitating towards people and groups who investigate that way. You investigate in a similar style with similar respect. And, there are probably other groups who investigate a little bit more, carefree or with a little less seriousness than the groups I'm with. But, that is my style, and that is the style of the groups that I am with. We definitely go in there and take things serious, but at the same time, we welcome other people in. We want to teach people. We want to show them how, you can embrace the field and embrace investigating with respect, but also, find answers in that respect. Like, if you're messing around, if you're a spirit and you're in a house and someone comes in your house and they're messing around, you're probably not going to want to talk to them.
Right.
So that's just sort of how we approach a lot of it. And the groups that I'm with all do the same.
Okay. So I imagine, like, let's talk about, let's say if you're going to a particular site, whether it's, I know you go out of state for a lot of investigations or local, but how important, I guess, like, I imagine there's a lot of research that gets done on a site,
Mm-hmm.
but is there a preference with doing research before going into an investigation or doing it after? Like, do you yourself or your team have a preference on how you do that?
That varies, honestly. And I think that varies for every group. I'm a huge researcher. I love researching places and histories and names. And I do usually like to go into a location with, some potential names of people who were there before, who may have died on site, or, or who other investigators came, received a name during their investigations. Sometimes I like to have those names to potentially, move activity along, or to, not to drive the investigation, I guess, but to see if it triggers a response. So there's two schools of thought. I mean, like, so that's one side. And the other side is, well, you don't want to do any of that research beforehand, because you don't want to prejudice yourself. Can't say that word right, but yeah, you don't want to, bias yourself in terms of the name of who might be there. Because, like, when you play back a recording, and you hear, you're like, oh, that said Bob, Francis from
Right.
something, and because now because that Bob Francis lived there,
Okay.
so now that would potentially bias your opinion on what that says. But if you don't have those names going, into it, then you might not hear that. You might hear something else. So I think when we as a group, or, not all of my groups, but I often will do my own, I will do research sometimes and just not tell people, who did what. And then I will ask a question like, is anyone from the, Francis family here? And then we'll see what kind of a response we get. and it can vary. So, but you have to be aware that if you know information ahead of time, you can bias yourself. You can also,
Right.
you already know the name. And if you
Right.
hear that name or you think you hear that name,
You could
um,
possibly like hear something that maybe is not being said, kind of.
exactly.
Yeah.
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 Cause this guy over here who didn't know the name, may not have heard that, may hear something completely different. So,
Mhm.
it's one factor to consider when you're investigating is whether or not you want that information ahead of time. I generally I mean, it varies. Like I did an investigation at the Concord Inn, the Colonial Concord Inn in Concord.
Mhm.
And a friend of mine wrote a book about the hauntings there, and he had done all this research. And all these names. He had all these names of all these people who had been in the area, because it was, the site of the shot heard round the world was in that area. And so he knew, the people who owned the inn, he knew some of the military people, and those were all in his book. And so I went to the investigation at this location, knowing these names. And and it actually helped a lot knowing the
Okay.
names, because I would ask, I'm like, well, is Major blah 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 here, or or did you work with them?
Okay.
And it would trigger responses. So,
Right.
it was, and I wasn't trying EVPs of that. It was just I was trying my other equipment,
Mhm.
that would trigger, based on different responses. And it was very helpful because we were getting a lot of responses because of those names that I knew. But again, in other locations, maybe it's not so helpful.
So what is your friend's name, the author of the book, and do you remember the name of this
Oh,
book?
yeah. So that is Sam Baltrusis, and his
Okay.
book is I think it's the Haunted Concord Inn, Colonial Concord Inn. Let me look it up. He's written
Yeah,
a
well,
number of books. One of his best selling books is on Salem,
oh,
and
okay. Awesome.
yeah, and then he just wrote one on Sleepy Hollow, which I read just before we went to Sleepy Hollow, which was super helpful. Yeah, so his book is The Ghost of Concord's Colonial Inn.
Okay, and then we'll put that in
But yeah,
show notes also for people later.
awesome. Yeah, he's very good. He used to be a journalist, before he got into paranormal stuff. So his writing style
Mhm.
is very, I like it because it's, I appreciate the journalistic style. And so, yeah, he just wrote Ghost of Sleepy Hollow, and he also has Ghost of Salem. So they're all really, really good. And Ghost of Sleepy Hollow was very interesting, when we went down to Sleepy Hollow, because, he kind of tipped on all of the locations in Sleepy Hollow and had a little story about the hauntings of each place. So that's kind of what he does. So it's interesting.
So you brought up Sleepy Hollow, and I know you went there recently, not too
Hmm.
long ago. Do you want to share a
Yeah.
little bit about your visit?
Yeah, well, we stayed at the Tarrytown Estates, which is a reportedly haunted hotel. It's a beautiful, like a former mansion there. Huge grounds. Like I highly recommend staying there. It's not your standard, kind of cookie cutter hotel that's in the area. Um, and they have a great restaurant on site with one of the winners of Top Chef or something like that. It's a great
Okay.
restaurant. But we ended up spending most of our time. My husband also investigates with me,
Uh,
and thankfully, because he tolerates my weirdness, because he investigates with me. Yeah, he's my tech department. He's usually my camera guy.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, and so we went, and we mostly spent like almost a full day and night in the cemetery there at the Sleepy Hollow
Really?
Cemetery. Yeah, because I read Sam's book, and I'd read all about the cemetery and the different stories, and there's different people that are in the cemetery, obviously, who have different stories of their own. Um, and so, basically walked around the cemetery all day in the daylight, finding these graves, and then there's the Sleepy Hollow Bridge, because it's the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery Bridge, and then there's like the Sleepy Hollow Bridge, it's a little vague on which one that ends up in that story of the Headless Horseman.
Gotcha.
But there's the cemetery bridge is interesting nonetheless. And then at night then we went to dinner, and then at night there was a lantern tour that we did
In the
of the
cemetery.
cemetery. Yeah, which was really, really cool because we saw different different locations than we did during the day. And they actually led us into this crypt, essentially. Like, so, back in the day when the ground would freeze, people's relatives would die, and then
Right.
the ground was too hard for them to bury them. So they
Okay.
would keep them in this, like a family, like it was like a town crypt essentially,
Like
which
above
had
ground.
different vaults. Yeah. Yeah. And so it had different vaults in it. So each family could put, I guess, a couple people in each
Okay.
one, if they had to for the winter. And it was kind of built into a hill, so like it would
Oh, okay.
maintain some warmth and coolness. You know what I mean? So it wouldn't be
Temperature
quite as
regulation.
affected.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and so they let us go in there and look around, and it had actually been part of, oh gosh, Dark Shadows. Remember the old TV series Dark Shadows?
Yeah.
Back in the day, before the
Yeah.
movie, like the the
Recent.
Johnny Depp
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
It was the old '60s TV series. I guess the vampire had been in, like they showed, like he actually went into one of these vaults, like for the show, and so
Oh.
good for him, because they shot him in this thing.
Oh
But
wow.
yeah, so they let us in there, so it was really, really cool to see this place at night. And actually we saw like a comet streak by while we were walking around there. And
Oh, cool.
on the way home, we were re-listening to the like an audiobook version of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and they actually said, like, he actually says in the story, the location has like the most comets sighted in the country, but like it was really weird because he
Wow.
mentioned that. And yeah, so it was, so
That
Sleepy
must
Hollow's
have
kind of
been
vibe. Like it's,
wow. I can't believe that happened.
yeah, yeah. So I highly recommend a trip to Sleepy Hollow for anyone who's kind of curious. They have a lot of historic homes there. Like Washington Irving's home is there, and there's a couple of other very Gothic mansions that are there. Also, for Dark Shadows was filmed in like one of these Gothic mansions that are there. Um, but those places are not really, they're very, like, you can't really go in there and do an investigation or anything. They're
Right.
not geared for that. They're geared as like museums. So I was disappointed in that because I was like, let's go
Right.
investigate.
Right.
But
Now,
yeah,
Sleepy Hollow's in New York, is it? Is it New York?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's just like right on the river, on the Hudson River in New York.
Oh, okay. Okay. Um, so I want to talk a little bit about, like, before going into an investigation, whether it's a site or home or anything like that, like, what types of things are important for either personally for yourself or your team that you might do, whether it might be a ritual or something for like energy protection?
Mm. Well, I think that varies, honestly, from investigator to investigator, depending on their own belief in some of those energies and protections. You know, I personally try to remember. I don't always remember. I try to remember to do, some sort of basic, crystal shield, or some sort of like energy of light to sort of protect us. It's usually after the investigation that we tend to, try and do like cord cutting, or, sort of like saging ourselves or whatever it might be, to try
Cleansing.
and,
Yeah.
yeah, some cleansing to say, okay, thank you for communicating with us, and please stay here. You can't follow me home.
Yeah. We're going to
Um,
leave you here.
yeah, yeah. We generally try to remember to do that. we are way more consistent doing it after the fact than before. So.
Gotcha. Well, it probably is more important. I would expect, that you really don't want something coming home with you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's,
Right.
honestly, like when I was early on, when I was investigating, my kids were younger, and I was like, well, I want to bring something home with me to these babies, I really
Right.
want to do
Yeah.
that. But the more I got into some of it, I realized that I could do some of those things, and I have different protections around my house. I have something above each door.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple of iron nails actually from Lizzie Borden's house later, Lisbeth Borden's house at
Yeah.
Maplecroft.
Okay.
And I know someone who used to work there, and so she gave, like, 'cause she had like just a jar full of those iron nails from the house, and so she
Mm-hmm.
gave us a couple. So I keep them above the door, and those are all supposed wards to keep
Gotcha.
something from entering your house, but you never know for sure. But I'll take whatever I can get.
Yeah, there's all kinds of methods out there, and I don't know that there's any one that's better than the other necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. So
So I know you have some of your tools with you, but let's talk about like the types of different tools you might use on an investigation. So if you want to start
yeah,
wherever you want to start.
yeah. So the number one, well, not the number one, but I guess like, if you got to go in some of these libraries, I'm going to say some libraries in Massachusetts have ghost hunter kits for lend in their libraries.
Really?
So I would say check out your library to see if they have a ghost hunter kit, because some of them do. But like the number one thing that's going to be in a ghost hunter kit is what's called an EMF meter. It's just a series of five lights that range from green to red, and they measure electromagnetic frequencies.
Okay.
And so, one theory is that, a spirit will send off electromagnetic frequencies that devices can pick up.
Okay.
And these little meters if something is detected, it will range to the red or whatever. And, the theory is that an entity can bring its energy to the meter to answer questions or, respond intelligently to questions by drawing their energy to it and increasing the lights on it. So to go to red, for example. One other way to use this tool is actually very helpful, is to determine the existing EMF that's in a room.
To get a
Because
baseline.
to get a baseline, because high EMF. So EMF comes off of electronic devices.
Okay.
Even outlets, faulty wiring can result
Mhm.
in a high EMF signal coming out of it.
Okay.
And you can get things like, you can experience things like paranoia, nervousness, feeling like you're being watched. Those kinds of things can be a human emotional response to a high
That
EMF
that
field.
will register. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so sometimes when you go into an investigation, certainly in a home investigation where someone is experiencing all of these things, you try to determine if there's high EMF in the space that they're spending time in.
Okay.
If there already is, then, it could be just, have an electrician come out here and let's insulate you from some of the stuff, and
Because
maybe
that's
you won't experience some
contributing
of these
to
things.
it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
Okay.
so it may or may not be an actual haunting. It just might be, you're experiencing all of these things because, you're being dosed with all this EMF.
All these
Um,
frequencies are just kind
yep.
of like invading you.
Yep, exactly. And so,
Okay.
you can go through a space and use the EMF meter to determine if there is high EMF somewhere. For example, just a recent example, on Friday, we were at the Grafton Library, and we were in one of the older sections, but the older section has, in its doorway, it's got these RFID massive things that read your books basically when you come in or go out or whatever. Like it's I don't know. It was thrown off a bunch of EMF,
Oh,
and we actually had to like figure out the radius of it. You know,
how
how
far
far
out
back.
would extend?
Yeah, yeah, because we didn't want to set up any of our stuff anywhere near that because it would
Right, that
just be
makes
all
sense.
false stuff.
Okay.
So, but we were able to figure that out because of the meters. We would move our stuff away from there. Another example, which was very disappointing, by the way, was we went
Mhm.
to a haunted place in San Antonio, and we have another device that is a little bit more sensitive to EMF, like it's even higher sensitivity, and it's like a string of lights, so it's a string of them. And this location is built on top of an Indian burial mound.
Uh,
And so because back in the day it was like the highest point of ground was, oh, it was on top of a burial mound. Sounds great.
okay.
No creepiness involved, right? But so
Right.
now the house is starting to settle. So like the main living room is over this mound, the crest of the mound, and now like you can see a big crack over there where the house is settling,
Mhm.
et cetera, et cetera. So like, you know, we come in, like we were testing the equipment and the string of lights was going crazy in this living room. Like it was just off the chart. I'd never seen it that high pegged. It was all red, like, you know, purple was neutral and red is hot.
Okay.
And so we're like, oh God. I just didn't think it was working right. I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to turn this off. And so then, you know, I tried it outside, because the outside of this location is also very haunted. Um, and it was neutral. And so I'm like, wait, it's not the thing, it's the house. Let's go back in there. And so we did. And what we would do is like we would cross as soon as we crossed the threshold, it would go crazy and peg
Mhm.
red. And you can walk all around this room, and it seemed like everywhere that was the crest of this mound that was in the center of this room was
Okay.
pegged red.
Huh.
And we didn't have time at that because this was like 3 o'clock in the morning. We didn't have time at the end of this investigation to continue to source this out. But we're like, well, what's under here? Is there electrical under here? What's under the floors? And they're like, there's nothing under the floors. There's an Indian burial mound under here, so there's nothing. And I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And so, you know, we touched it to the electrical. We touched it to the outside breakers, and nothing was doing that. And so
Wow.
we went back a second time and we're like, okay, now let's really work this. Let's really see if it's doing. And it's so as soon as you approach the thing, it would turn peg red and you'd walk out and it would go neutral. And we're like, okay, well, all right, let's just keep figuring it out. And someone goes, and this is one of the rare examples where we weren't completely in the dark, because the room was so big and there was one chandelier in the center of the room. And someone's like, well, turn off the chandelier. Turned off the chandelier, the whole thing went neutral. The
Oh,
chandelier was throwing
wow.
out so much, yeah, it was throwing so much EMF out that anywhere near it was pegged red. And so, and of course, we're like, what's that chandelier doing to the rest of us now? I don't know about this
Wow.
chandelier.
That's crazy.
But yeah, so I don't like that example because that was very disappointing because we thought it was really the Indian burial mound and we couldn't really figure it out, and I thought it was cool, but it turns out to be the chandelier the whole time. So it's a good lesson in trying to figure out a logical source of something that seems to be unexplainable at the time. But we explained that one, which was, sad for me.
Right. Right. Um, that sounds pretty
Oh, did you?
interesting.
So
So,
yeah, so that's the EMF. We
yep.
also have it's called a REM pod, and forgive me, I don't really remember what REM stands for. It might stand for the guy who invented it, but it's actually it's more of a proximity device. Like, so there's an antenna, and it makes this noise. Let me look at my closer to my headphones here. Um, and so the idea is that an energy can draw, or a spirit can draw its energy to the device, and it makes more intense. It's like what's the? It's not a xylophone. Dang, what's it? A theremin. It's like a theremin. Um,
Okay.
that makes that kind of a noise. So that's the idea with that. And sometimes we get a
Shannon.
lot of hits on these in certain locations. Yeah,
So real quick, for the people that aren't going to be able to see the video, but they're listening,
yeah,
can you describe the REM pod, like kind of what it looks like, and do you set it on the floor somewhere, or
sure.
how does it work?
Yeah, so it's so this particular one is just like a black and red puck almost. It's got
Okay.
several lights on the top of it, and it
Okay.
has an antenna. And so, it just makes noise when you get in the proximity to the device. So that's kind of the noise it makes. But you can have these in different form factors. I have one of my favorite ones is it's a planchette looking one. Someone made it,
Oh,
but it does the same exact thing. Um, so you can so you can create a REM pod of just about anything. Like they make stuffed animals with them, as trigger objects.
oh
In
wow.
theory, that like a child would be drawn to a child spirit would be drawn to a stuffed animal potentially.
Oh, I see.
Um,
Interesting.
and yeah, we usually put it on the floor, or on a chair or something that, in the middle of a table, depending on where we think someone might want to come touch it. And the noise can be annoying to a spirit, so we just say it's not going to hurt you. Don't worry, it'll be fine.
Okay.
But there. Oh, sorry, my screen went blank for a second. And so we have, and there also is a device called the Spirit Box, and I can try and turn it on. It's so a Spirit Box. There's lots of different versions. One version, or this version, is basically a radio tuner, and it just scans through radio stations,
Okay.
with, I'll turn it on, and so I'll turn on my glasses on. Do you hear it scanning?
Yeah.
So you can change the sweep rate of it, because that's super fast. Apparently not picking up any radio stations right now. Or something. So the idea behind this is that a spirit will draw its energy to it and basically say words.
Like the spirit
And
will
so you
use the frequency to kind of
Mhm.
deliver words.
to deliver words. And so you can, ask questions and maybe get an intelligent response. And there are lots of different ways to use this device. One way is to just have it be that way and just audible to everyone in the room.
Yep.
Another way is to use what we call a quote unquote portal, which is just a fancy sort of filter or amplifier device. Usually like a guitar amp, sort of modified in different ways. So
Oh,
you'd
okay.
feed this into that, and it would
Yeah.
filter that sound,
Yeah.
because that sound could be really irritating after a while.
Gotcha. Okay. Like
Um,
fingernails
and
on a
and so
chalkboard.
yeah, and so if you filter it, then the theory is that you would just hear the words coming through.
Gotcha.
But you could spend anywhere from like $100 to, somebody's homemade portal to $3,000
Okay.
to, these custom jobs, that look really pretty, but I'm not sure that they're more effective than the $100 job. They really range. So, your mileage varies with those. But another way to use those but that's not out loud, that's not, broadcast to the group, is by using headphones.
Okay.
And so that method, there's a couple different methods. But one method is with headphones, noise canceling headphones, and a blindfold. And that's called the
Okay.
Estes method.
Okay.
And that is supposed to be a sensory kind of method where the listener can't hear anyone in the room asking
Okay.
questions, and they can't see anyone, or this, and so it's all dark, and all you're hearing is this device now. And the listener is just repeating whatever they hear. And whether or not it makes sense to anyone in the room who's asking a question,
Okay.
that's where the interesting part comes in. I've worked with, and if the listener is somewhat sensitive, you get really interesting results, let's just say. One of my good friends is she's quite sensitive, and she's working on it even more, but she really just becomes like a channel when she does the Estes method. And during like one of the early investigations I did with her, she did this method, and we were in South Carolina at a cabin, and some of the stuff that she was coming through was so vulgar and just a stream of curses. And this is the most prim, wonderful, polite woman I've never heard her
like her
curse.
personality. Yeah.
No, I never heard her curse other than this session, honestly. And just the stuff that was coming out was just wow. Like whatever she was touched into was very vulgar. And I mean, among the, her tapping into the energy issues aside, like what I find very interesting about that was because this thing, these devices cue to radio stations, FCC regulated radio stations. So you're not getting these kinds of curses or the kinds of things that she was saying on
Right,
an actual radio station.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, just and like reactive stuff, like somebody would leave the room and she'd be like, "Where are you going?" And like it was.
Oh wow.
It was really, really interesting. Among the most interesting sessions that I've done with the Estes, but so that's one way to use it. There are other different devices. You can use white noise instead of the radio station. You can use white noise and then have goggles maybe in a red light. All different, scenarios of sensory deprivation with different sound isolation. So those are just some other techniques. And then of course is just there's one, this is the cheap and easiest version of an investigator tool. They're called cat balls. Like you can Google them or put them on Amazon, and it's just a light up toy. It's a light up round ball that you turn on and off, but it's motion sensor, like it's motion triggered. So if you set it down, like it'll stop, but if you like move it at all, it'll trigger. So those can be really cool toys, and they're as long as I don't call them cat toys when I'm on investigation, because I've definitely found some spirits who are like, well, I don't play with toys. Like, so I just say it's a light ball, or I say something else.
I actually got one of those when I went to Gettysburg a few years ago.
Oh yeah.
We went on a ghost tour, and my daughter and I, we got from one of the shops in the tours. We picked up a couple of those. They're kind of fun. But yeah, they remind me of
they are
toys.
fun. Yeah, they are, like Amazon sells them as cat toys. I can tell you that my cats don't freaking play with them, but but yeah, so they're really inexpensive ways to have some sort of a sensory light scenario. We've had really good luck with them at the Oliver House in Middleborough, the Peter Oliver House. It's like if you go into the children's bedroom there, we had some really, really interesting reactions to it there. And then the other, of course, is just trying to record an electronic voice phenomena with anything. Like you can use your phone or get a cheap recorder from somewhere. They range in efficacy, of course, and from location to location they can be different. I have a friend who has the same exact recorder that I do. I have an older Panasonic recorder, because the theory behind some of the older models is that they have fewer filters. Like they're actually crappy recorders, like really crappy voice, like what they're designed to do, they're
Yep.
crappy at it.
Okay.
Because their fidelity sucks. But in terms of I guess it might be mythology at this point, or like urban myth, is that when people would be recording with these recorders back in the day, they were getting all these other random voices. They're like, well, who the hell is that? And the theory it was a spirit in the room with them or something, were trying to come through.
Oh.
So that's the myth of some of them. But I just go with that. They're they don't have as many filters as the modern recorders do. But I have a range of different recorders from this one to more modern ones. And you can line them up. Like you can literally line up like maybe 5 recorders next to each other and get different stuff on different recorders. So some of that theory is that it's just a frequency, that whatever was trying to come through at that point was interacting on that frequency at that time, and X recorder picked it up. But one of the best recordings I've heard was from the West Virginia State Penitentiary. Was a girlfriend of mine was recording by herself in a cell, and she was using her phone. She was just recording on her phone, and a very, very clear male voice, like, because she was trying to do what she was trying to do was like to have trigger objects. She had like a what do you call it? Like a little thing of alcohol.
Okay.
The thing like a whiskey thing, and she had
Yeah.
like a cigarette. She was trying different trigger objects to get a response, and she
Okay.
almost knocked one over. She was like moving around, and she almost knocked one over, and she didn't hear it audibly, but she what she heard was later when she played it back, while she was like, oh no, I gotta fix that, oh no, at that same moment in the recording, you hear like a male voice go, oh, for the love of, like of all the people, and it's so loud, like, and he
Wow.
was like, it was like he's reacting to like her almost knocking the stuff over, and it was really, really cool.
It's like, why are you so clumsy?
So yeah, pretty much like, for of all the people to be in my cell, and it's gonna knock this stuff over, it's you. I'm like, I don't know what you're proud, it was it was really fun. So you can try anything, and so like, as for someone just wanting to investigate, just getting started out, just use your phone. You can just try and record stuff. Yeah, I mean, you can get EMF detectors. There's some knockoff versions that you can get for like $25. There's the more, they call them legitimate versions, like the original ones that have better circuitry, I guess, have a black label on them. And then quote unquote knockoffs have white labels. So if you're looking for one of those, but I think the knockoffs work just fine too, as long as they have good batteries. Some cat balls and go, just that's
nice.
But I'm a gadget person. I have just about everything because I just love I love isolating variables. So I'm always like gonna get a new piece of equipment to isolate some variables.
So let me ask you, so you've clearly investigated a lot of locations. Is there any experience, or maybe a couple different experiences, that places you've investigated that you either felt like either really uncomfortable or it was a little unnerving? Do you have anything like that?
I'd say probably the place that I wouldn't go back to would be in New Orleans. And I won't
Okay.
say the location because I don't want to get in trouble. But there's a location in New Orleans that is associated with a voodoo scenario.
Okay.
That it was probably one among the more darker places that I've been to, and I've been to these prisons, right? I mean, these prisons are dark. That's obvious. But
Now,
this place just had a
when you say
different vibe.
dark, do you mean visibly dark or heavy energy?
Heavy, heavy, heavy. Like
Okay.
everything is. Yeah, I only investigate dark places. You know what I mean? It's like,
Gotcha. Right.
yeah, it's the prisons have you know, a heaviness to them. And I don't know, I'm not going to say there's demons there or they're evil or whatever, but I'm going to say that, there's a lot of negative energy that is sort of pooled in these places. And that can affect you one way or the other. But New Orleans, at least certainly this place that we went to, had a different, darker vibe. Like, it wasn't, because I think the prisons have a darker negative energy because there's just so many people. You know what I mean? It's just a lot. In
Yeah.
this place, like a murder happened on this location, like a pretty grisly murder.
Okay.
And just that scenario felt different. And the person running the place felt like she was super nice, but felt like she might really. The concept of an energy vampire is sort of, I don't know if you know that concept or not, but someone who feeds off the energy of other people.
Okay.
And there are, Michelle Boulanger, who is a pretty renowned psychic medium. She used to be on my friend Ryan's show, Paranormal State. And she is a very outspoken, outed energy
Yes.
vampire.
Right.
And I believe, I think there are plenty of others out there. But I feel like, I mean, Michelle is above board, like with her, like, I need energy, so let's have a symbiotic relationship where you give me energy and I give you something else.
She goes to about it in a respectful way.
Yeah, exactly. And I felt like the New Orleans thing wasn't quite that way. Because several of us definitely felt very drained after the experience in a way that we don't normally from an investigation.
So do you feel like it was the place that was draining you? Is that what you were saying?
I think it was both. Like, I think the
A little
place
of both?
itself has
Okay.
an oppressive energy to it, but
Mhm.
also the folks running it sort of have get some benefit, from the folks that attend, in terms of
Okay.
energy.
All right.
So, we just all came away very drained, more than usual. So I can't say for, certain what was going on in that scenario, just that of the places I would go back to, I probably would not go back there.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Anything else you want to say about that?
Most places I go, I generally, I'm pretty comfortable. Just, I think a lot of places tend to, the energy of the group that you're with is important. I think, so I tend to go with people that I'm comfortable with. They're comfortable with me. We have it's the it's the family you choose kind of scenario. And so when I'm going to an investigation with the family I choose, I'm generally pretty comfortable. Different things happen, but in terms of overall, I think that I'm generally pretty fine. Like, there's some wickedly haunted places that I love to go back to all the time.
So, I want to go back to just a little bit, to talk a little bit about like places that have a lot of paranormal activity. You have these public places, but, let's say we're talking about like individuals in their homes, they have a lot of paranormal activity. They,
Mm-hmm.
they're undergoing probably a lot of stress from that and probably not sure how to handle that. But I wanted, before we finish up, I wanted to talk a little bit about what we were talking about before we started recording with Ryan. I don't remember his last
Mm-hmm.
name, but to
Right in Buell,
work with, to work with setting up that national organization to work with people that have suffered, let's say, PTSD from like paranormal activity. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, super happy to. Like, um, you know, yeah, most groups do this, as a hobby. We're not accustomed to going into, I mean, we do on occasion go into people's homes and help them try and solve their own individual hauntings, or figure out, whether it's like, pipes banging on the wall, or if it's a poltergeist, like there's a range, obviously. Um, and the longer you're in doing this, you have a network of people that so my group, I work locally, I investigate locally with a group called Paranormal New England. And we generally don't do individual home investigations, but we can. We just don't get a lot of those requests. And it depends on where it is too, because our group is kind of all over the place geographically. And so, if we don't know ourselves how to handle a scenario, or can, investigate a home, we have a good network of folks who can, locally and not locally. So the investigation is one thing, right? You have the investigation, you do all this stuff. Okay, great. You got a haunting, don't piss it off. As an investigator, what are you going to do with that? Like, you can either have them, hire, like get a demonologist or an exorcist to come in and get rid of it, or or live with it. Right. So they have to figure out what to do after. And, and that's the trick, is what to do after. After you know what it is, or you've isolated what it is, how do you support that family, in sort of managing whether if the haunting's gone, are you dealing with the PTSD now of it, or if it's still there, if still an active haunting, how do you have them still live their lives?
Right.
And, as people who, I'm a lawyer, like that's my day job. And then I don't know what to do with that, good luck. So here, get some crystals. I don't know. And so so I work with Ryan Buell. He used to have a television show called Paranormal State. And when he was younger, he had his own very significant hauntings when he was younger. And he dealt with a lot of demons himself, like personal demons, like actual demons and personal demons, I think. And sorry, my screen keeps going away from me. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know why this keeps going away. Anyway, so he had some addiction issues, and so he was very public. He had a very public meltdown and burnout. And once he figured out how to manage some of that and deal with his own addictions, he got clean and he went to school, and now he's a therapist in San Antonio. And his primary goal right now is to create a network of therapists in the United States that obviously, regular therapy for regular folks, but also therapy for folks who have dealt with a haunting, whether it's a past haunting or an active haunting. Whether, something when you were a kid or something now, like literally right now. And he's working with another therapist, Dr. Darren. They just did a talk at the Warrens Paracon in Gettysburg a few weeks ago about this and about the network they're trying to create. And Dr. Darren actually has cases right now, certainly one case where the haunting showed up at his office. Like, he was talking to the family, and stuff in his office started to spin, and he's
started
like,
happening.
"Oh, yeah." He's like, "You mean right now? Like it's right now." And they're like, "What have we been talking about?" And he's like, "Oh, okay. I didn't know it was going to show up in my office."
Yeah.
So, and so it was really interesting to me. They were talking about, so there's some, thanks to the pandemic and telehealth, the need for telehealth, a lot of the states are creating a network, or at least a reciprocity for therapists. So like so right now, therapists have to be licensed in the state when they practice. And so like Ryan can't take on patients who are not in Texas right now. And Darren is in Colorado. So they can't represent or, help clients outside of the states right now. But I think it's very soon. I think it's in 2025 that reciprocity is supposed to start kicking in, where they can, talk to clients outside of state. And that will also help them. So meanwhile, and in addition to that, they're trying to create a network of someone, at least have someone in every state who can help, patients trying to deal with these hauntings. So it's really important work that they're doing, trying to give the support. And, part of it, there's a lot of people certainly in this field who did have past hauntings in their childhood who are pretty messed up by it. They have their own addiction issues. They have a lot of other issues because they were not believed when they were younger. Like, they're like, oh yeah, okay, whatever, blah, 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 you're haunted. You're just crazy, not crazy, have something else is going on. And so, they are trying to really create that network where there's support for everyone who may or may not. And they could be dealing with someone who thinks it's a haunting, but it's not. But they would actually have someone, but they would feel validated that someone actually talked to them about it and listened to them and helped them through, whatever it is. So, so very excited for Ryan to try and really create that network. And so Ryan I don't know, so he may not have people right now in other states that he can refer people to, but he might. So that's an ongoing thing with them. And once that reciprocity kicks in, it'll help a lot.
Just a follow-up question to that. Did Darren or Ryan talk about anything about because they have their own probably experiences with this stuff. And there might be clinicians in other states that have never dealt with anything like this before. Are they putting together workshops or some sort of trainings for this therapy network?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think that's probably part of that goal, that larger goal. Certainly finding, because it's really difficult, obviously, for them to find, therapists who take it seriously. You know what I mean?
It's very niche thing.
It's really a niche thing. And I think, the paranormal has always been sort of a, don't talk about that because people think you're crazy scenario. So, finding people who are willing to talk about it and essentially out themselves professionally, saying well, I believe this is true.
Yeah, right.
This is not a symptom of some other problem that they have. Saying that this actually, they might be actually experiencing a real haunting is very different. But it's becoming, I believe it's actually becoming more to the forefront, and in part thanks to all of the shows that are out there. I mean, obviously, I got to say that some of the shows have stopped thanks to Max for killing most of them. But the HBO Max killed a lot of the shows right now. So there's only, Ghost Adventures is pretty much the only thing filming right now, which has its own ups and downs. But at least that discussion is out there. For good or for bad, for some of these shows. Some of the shows are very overly sensationalized, and it's a demon. Oh God, it's almost never a demon. Let me just tell you, I work with the guys who run what's the NESPR, which is the New England Society for Paranormal Research, which is Ed and Lorraine Warren's group, and
Okay.
they're the guys who deal with demons, not me.
Gotcha.
And so I don't. They deal with the demons, and it's not very often. You know what I mean? Like, so they'll be the first to tell you it's not a demon, not a demon. So the shows, like, I get down on some of the shows because they make it seem like everything's dark, everything's negative. If you hear like a really loud noise in an EVP, oh no, it's a growl. It's not a growl. It might not be a growl. I don't know. If someone's trying to like actually, emote something, maybe it comes across as a growl. I don't know. But at least those conversations are out there. And like at least it feels like those conversations are being had more often now. So for good or for bad, the shows are at least getting those dialogues to happen. And so maybe the person who is having a haunting, maybe somebody who's having a haunting is not going to be like, well, I have a demon, but I have something going on.
Right.
And so, they might be willing to talk about it.
Not being kept in the dark, no pun intended.
Right. Not quite as taboo. But I do find, the one thing I do find is very interesting is when I do talk to quote unquote regular people about what I do, for fun. I, do the investigating for fun. You'll even the most straight-laced, like conservative person I've talked to has a story.
Yeah, I'm sure.
About a haunting or something they couldn't explain. Like this one guy I was talking to, at work, he was like, oh, you believe in ghosts? I'm like, well, don't you? And he's like, well, actually, I did see this weird thing, and he told me all this about this story, like this thing he saw on a chair on a porch and then it vanished. And I'm like, aha. Aha. Yeah, everybody's got a story. And it's really fun when people reveal themselves.
Awesome. So this has been an awesome conversation. It is October. So I just want to ask you, like, is there any favorite things? I know you love doing the paranormal investigations, but is there anything either connected to that or anything else you like to do for October?
Usually I'm just jammed with investigations, or our group does Paranormal 101 talks at some different locations in New England.
Okay.
We've got one at the Hull Life Saving building in Situate. There's another one at Franklin, I think, Library. And then there'll be one coming up at the 23rd, the Grafton Library. We're doing just sort of like what investigating is. And, it gives some EVPs that we've captured and some video of me being weird. And so that's kind of what, and October is sort of like a work month for paranormal people. It's not as
That
fun
makes sense.
as it. Yeah, it's like we're spooky all year round. Now it's like we got to get to work.
Right. And then would you have any advice for anybody with helping them maybe keep an open mind to like the stuff that we can't see or understand?
Well, I mean, that's always the hard part, right? But
It is.
I think you're never going to, not never, but a lot of things can't be explained, and you can, try and blow it off, or, oh, it's the wind, or, oh, it's that, like, and that's every horror movie, right? I was actually just watching Paranormal Activity with my daughter, and she's like, they won't believe them. Oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, it's like, you got this, there's always a skeptic who's like, oh, it's just the wind, or, oh, you're imagining it, or, oh, something else. Well, in those movies, those people are dead. So, but mostly just, if you do have someone, that comes to you and says, I heard this, or I heard that, or I felt this, or I felt that, just listen to them, and even if you're a skeptic, just try and be patient enough to hear them, and maybe work through with them. I told my daughter that if, or she's like, you'll believe me if I tell you I saw something, I heard something. Well, yeah, but the first thing we're going to do is try and figure out the rational explanation for it. Well, I'll believe you, and I'll believe that you had an experience, and I believe that what you're saying is true, but we're going to figure out, was it pipes in the wall? You know what I mean? We're going to figure out,
Right.
if there is a reasonable explanation to something, and we will both feel better if we can figure that out. And if we can't, I'm still going to believe you, and we're going to figure out the next step. So that's where that paranormal side comes in, is when you've exacerbated all of the other, possible explanations for something, is that, you look for things that might not be probable, but as long as it's not scary, it can be fun. But if it is scary, you can call some other people. I know people.
And then I know you mentioned a friend earlier in the episode, one of his books or a few of his books he's written. But besides that, do you have any favorite paranormal books that you would recommend to people?
Well, I would say, if you want to learn, I mean, I don't know. It depends on what you're into.
And we can put
if
a
you
couple of suggestions in the show notes too, after the fact, if you have some ideas.
Right. Well, if folks ever watched, some older folks probably may have watched Paranormal State. Ryan wrote a book of itself, which is kind of behind the scenes of some of the episodes. And Ed and Lorraine Warren wrote a bunch of books. One of the books, The Demonologist, is a good book, in terms of, but that's definitely on the darker side of the demonology stuff, which I don't usually do. I'm trying to take a peek at my books over there. There are a number. It really depends on which way you want to go with some of
I
them.
guess where
In
the
terms
interest is,
of,
right?
yeah, because if you're just, like Sam's books are really great if you just want to learn about hauntings. Like I want to go. He's done a bunch of books on Boston and Cambridge and that kind of stuff. And there's another author for New England. His name is Thomas D'Agostino. Also written a whole bunch of books on New England. So those are great books on just locations and hauntings. So if you want to just poke around yourself at some of these locations, those are really, two really good authors for New England. And I think that that's probably the best place to start, just if you're sort of dipping your toe into the field.
Toes, yeah.
Yeah, because those are definitely more fun. Of like, oh well, this has this, the white lady. There's always a white lady. There's a white lady, and then and this person and that person. And they will definitely have some locations that you can go and do public investigations at. That's the next thing I would recommend if you actually had an interest in it, is to go to a public investigation at some places. My favorite haunt in New England is the USS Salem, hands down. It's a heavy cruiser, one of the last heavy cruisers, if not the last heavy cruiser still in existence, built in the 50s. And it's stationed in Quincy Harbor. And you can go do day tours of it. It has a museum, and they have legit daytime tours, but they also do public paranormal investigations. They'll do that probably through Halloween, I think early November. They shut it down once it starts to get cold because the thing doesn't have any heat. So they got to turn it off. So then they'll open back up in the spring. But that place is probably the most actively haunted places in New England that I go to. And the crew there, like the living crew, the folks who run it are really good friends of mine. They're just wonderful. Like they're no nonsense investigators who are really, really great. And then, then there's, if you're sort of near the Cape, there's Middleborough, the Peter Oliver House. Christy Parrish runs that. And then there's the Emery Mansion. I think that's Weymouth. And they do public investigations there all the time at both those places. And there's one, if you're more north, there's the mansions in Winchendon. Those are they do public investigations there. And then in Gardner, this S.K. Pierce Mansion. They don't usually, I guess they do some public investigations. They're usually sponsored by, one celebrity or another. But those are some really, really good places. My first investigation was at one of those Winchendon mansions. It was a bunch of years ago. And I saw, I don't even know where, probably on Facebook somewhere, that there was a public investigation. And I'm like, wait, you can do that for real? I didn't know you could do that for real. Because, I'd seen all the shows but then I saw that. And so, so that was probably the first place I investigated. And it was terrible because there was too many people, and we were some friends who were just joking. That's one of those things, like when you go to a public place, you're going to have a mix of people. And, one of my friends wanted to scare us most of the time and bang on pipes and literally those big air duct pipes.
Yeah,
with freak us out. I think we almost got kicked out. I'm not going to lie. Almost got kicked out. But,
well, let's leave it on that, Shannon. This was an awesome conversation for the October season. I had fun with this conversation. I hope you did too.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, guys, we will talk to you next time. And don't forget to find us, subscribe, and like and share us. So long. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Mystery of the Soul. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you have a question, topic suggestion, or just want to say hi, we'd love to hear from you. You can visit our website at mysteryofthesoul.com, reach us on Instagram, or email us at mysteryofthesoulpodcast@gmail.com. If you're interested in booking a session with Leo, you can contact us at Mystery of the Soul or visit Leo's website directly at leomediummccarthy.net.